Neighbors. Is that enough said? I mean, neighbor disputes. It's sometimes when you have a neighbor dispute, it's like you're living in hell. I mean, I've had some when I've lived in apartment complexes, or when I was having a neighbor dispute when I was in college. I had at my fraternity house neighbor disputes. So it's something we all face, and we're very lucky today to have Don Lanson of Manfredi Levine, who is an expert, the top expert in real estate law, and especially neighbor disputes. He has a lot to tell us about how we can resolve these neighbor disputes legally, ethically, and hopefully efficiently, so that we don't have them. We're very thankful to have you here today.
Thanks for being here.
You're a busy man. You're a
Thanks
city.
for you being here.
Well, that's right. It's better that I'm here.
Yeah,
for
that helps.
To ask you questions.
That helps.
But you are a city planning commissioner for the city of Thousand Oaks.
Yep.
You are also a managing, or one of the top partners for Manfredi Levine.
Right.
And you're also a father.
Correct.
With a daughter. Just graduated.
Just graduated law school, studying for the bar, and she's really happy about it.
It's amazing that she's a lawyer.
I know. To think one of your child actually going and helping people and doing stuff. It's kind of.
And she wants to go into a more, does she want to go into public law or?
Estate planning.
Oh, estate planning.
She likes to plan for the future. Shocking that she would get that from somebody whose dad isn't a planning commissioner.
Well, it's funny. I hear a lot of stories. A lot of times, sons and daughters of lawyers don't become lawyers because it's a tough job.
Yeah, I mean, my wife wanted her to be a CPA, and she went, "No, I don't like numbers." So I said, "Well, great, do law," and she said, "Fantastic." So it worked out well.
Well, we were going to go into your background a little bit more, but I think what we're going to do is get right to the topic, which are neighbor disputes. And you mentioned today before we started that you had a couple little stories about celebrity neighbor disputes. Manfredi Levine is such a famous, prominent firm. They handle celebrity neighbor disputes.
Some of I can't go to the ones I did, but these are actually some of the most famous ones. And again, the problem being is now because of the economy, people are staying in their houses longer.
Okay.
So it's creating a lot more tension, and celebrities have just as many problems as we all do. Years ago, Beyonce was sued when she was filming the video "Why Don't You Love Me" by her neighbor, who didn't love her because she was filming at 7 o'clock in the morning and making too much noise. Charlie Sheen got sued by his neighbor because he mentioned that the character Rose from his TV show, 2.5 Men, actually was like his neighbor, and the neighbor thought that wasn't good because that person was a stalker-type negative person. Leonardo DiCaprio built a basketball hoop on his property and screwed the neighbor foundation, and he got sued for that. Sylvester Stallone sued Vin Scully, legendary Dodger broadcaster.
I thought he was unsuable, especially here in L.A.
You don't mess with the white stallion here.
Yeah.
He sued him because rainwater and other things actually flooded Vin Scully's house.
Oh my God.
Katy Perry and Katherine Heigl got sued for noise problems, usually coming from the hot tub in the bedroom.
Get that.
Let's see. Gwyneth Paltrow got sued because she put a 9-foot tall fence next to her neighbor's yard, and it was deemed a spite fence, which is a fence put up to basically upset the neighbor.
I cannot imagine Gwyneth Paltrow being a bad neighbor. I mean,
well, this was during the Chris Martin. This was during the Chris Martin.
Oh, the Chris Martin part. Okay.
Let's see. Sean Connery got sued 3 times by his neighbor because the smells emanating from Sean Connery's apartment was so bad the guy couldn't breathe.
Oh my God.
But by far the one that I enjoy the most is actually a few years ago. Justin Bieber actually was accused of throwing eggs at a neighbor's house and actually had a claim against him. Turns out he caused $20,000 of damage by the eggs in nice Italian wood. And the reason they knew it was him is they actually confiscated his video camera equipment, and they saw on his own camera equipment he was throwing eggs at his neighbor. So note to self, turn off your security camera if you're going to vandalize your neighbor's property.
Not the sharpest tool.
Not good.
Huh?
Not good.
Right.
Not good. That's why he moved.
Well, you know what's interesting? A lot of areas in life, there's a lot of laws for it. So if you're getting a divorce, if you're getting married, if you're going through life's changes, there's a lot of laws about it so that you can resort to these laws to help you resolve problems or to go through the process. What's interesting is neighbor disputes, whether it be at an apartment, a condo, a single family residence, or frankly, we'll talk about it later, a commercial neighbor dispute, which we actually get sometimes too at our law firm. There isn't like a whole lot of rule books to show you how you peacefully resolve a neighbor dispute. And so by the end of today's video today, I think you've promised me we're going to have some concrete steps to efficiently and effectively resolve neighbor disputes. Now, your law firm does handle neighbor disputes, correct?
We absolutely do neighbor disputes. It's about a quarter of our business now, which has risen.
That's amazing.
And we usually deal with the common neighbor disputes: noise, pets, kids, visual nuisance, obstructions, and boundary disputes. Those are the main areas of neighbor problems.
We have a lot of that, I know, like in Malibu area, where there's a whole requirement about views, right? Because we have beautiful areas here, and there's a whole setup where you actually have to put together like a like a diagram of the particular blocking part of the residence?
So very important for your viewers to know.
Yeah.
In Malibu, they actually have a law that actually protects views. Most of the time, most of us in other areas don't have a right to a view at all.
Really?
Really. So unless you're in a very specific area like Palos Verdes Estates or Malibu, they have restrictions. Otherwise, you don't have a right to a view unless there's a home association or other rule that actually says it.
Oh my gosh.
So it can be, again, then people say, I spent extra money with regard to getting this view of whatever. You don't have a right to a view unless it's in a statute or a home association rule.
This is crazy. I don't know why there are not more laws, because I know views aren't everywhere. There's not beautiful views for every residence, but there should be some laws that govern it, because we have beautiful places where we live, and there should be some sort of law. It's so weird how there aren't laws.
And you pay extra money for it, not realizing that at some point somebody can build a second story on their house and literally block it. And that's unfortunately the open area of how it's supposed to be. Is we want to have people have the best use of property, and we want to actually.
Do you actually get those disputes? You hear those disputes as a city planning commissioner, or would it be more of a city councilman situation?
We don't hear them too much because usually the city isn't involved, because that's usually neighbor to neighbor. Again, we're looking at code compliance to make sure that whatever additions they've done is within the code and permits and stuff like that. But beyond that, if there's a obstruction or problem, that's usually going to be a private issue between the parties.
We have a question from the audience. It says, can neighbors agree to a view easement that will last in perpetuity if they are in areas other than Rancho Palos Verdes or Malibu?
Thank you for that question. The parties can agree to an easement that actually is recorded against the property, that actually is not only a binding agreement between them, but actually goes with the land and would be binding on anybody else that would be buying the property, either I would use terms dominant and serving estate, but either property, so to speak.
Can you just repeat that for the viewers?
Sorry, yeah, went a little
fast.
fast.
Was that dominant? What?
Sorry about that. So you can have an agreement. So say, for instance, I get this all the time, where somebody builds a pool. They don't realize at some point that their pool is a few feet over the line, and maybe the city doesn't see it. It's happened all the time. At some point, they want an agreement with their neighbor to say, hey, I'm not going to make you rip out your pool, but I want something in place to say, we have an agreement that you're going to maintain it, who's responsible, maintenance, insurance, and stuff like that. You can sign a document, an easement usually what it's called, that you would record that would be agreement between you as to that issue, and would be binding on anybody else who would buy either of the properties.
A lot of viewers out there live in apartments. And I think apartments, I want to say it's probably the most overt situation where they face neighbor complaints, because there's noise, there's moving at all hours, there's a whole bunch of different smells, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Apparently he's reliving that right now.
And so, as
see, he is.
I'm embarrassed. Could you have any tips for the viewers about resolving apartment, wall-to-wall type?
Right. So the reality is, according to surveys, 42% of us will have a neighbor dispute at some point. A lot of them do come from apartments, actually. People don't realize that. A lot of times people, for instance, I had one recently where somebody put hardwood floor in instead of carpeting. And all of a sudden, the tap was an issue because the downstairs neighbor was a Vietnam vet and thought the tapping actually was machine gun fire. So that's a problem. The reality is, first and foremost, look at the rules and regulations of wherever you're living. If it's an association, apartment complex, bylaws, whatever it is, will actually have a detailed rule of what you can and can't do, and shockingly, you should follow those. That's what they're there for. If you're going to do any other remodeling, some HOAs actually have neighbors sign something to say that they acknowledge that this is going to end up happening. I have a case now actually where somebody put solar panels up and didn't get a signature. The problem is the light during times of day actually comes and is now melting away the windows of a neighboring property owner.
Oh my gosh.
So apartments, again, are a little unique because you're so close. So little tiny things, again, smells, cooking, whatever. And keep in mind, if you leave the water on too much and it overflows, it's not going to ruin just your place. It's going to ruin your downstairs neighbor. And whether or not that's common area, whether or not it's belonging to the association. So again, make sure you follow the rules. Number two, if you're going to do any kind of improvements, make sure you talk to those that might be affected so that you understand anything that might end up happening. Number three, follow the codes and permits. Don't do things unpermitted. I know that makes shockingly, but follow the codes and permits. And number four, feel that it's kind of 1950s. Talk to your neighbors. Actually go out of your way. I know we don't do block parties and stuff anymore, but actually communicate with your neighbors, because guess what? It actually smooths those things out. Most of the time people don't, they come to me first and I'm like, no, I'm the last step. You should do a whole bunch of other stuff.
Well, I really think that's true, because it reminds you of the situation where you're at a Dodger game or you're at a movie and someone's talking or laughing loud or doing something that makes you mad. I'm about to say something else. Sorry.
Live.
I know, my God. And you're caught in this weird thing. You're like, I really want to watch this movie, or I really want to watch this game. should I say something? And it's the same thing with neighbor situations, right? It's like you want to preserve some sort of relationship, and the minute you criticize, because you're going to criticize them, right? You say, listen, your cooking is too smelly, your music is too loud, they're going to get in a defensive posture, right? And say, no, I didn't, they'll explain it or do whatever. So is there any way to avoid that? Would you say talking to them first?
So you said, what are the steps? And let's go through those. So first and foremost, talk to your neighbor.
Okay.
Again, the reality is most of the time you can diffuse a situation by actually having, I don't know, a physical communication with them to create a rapport. Get to know their kids, get to know their business, back and forth. Do that stuff. Talk to them, number one. Number two, if you're an association, there may be a management company.
Yeah.
You can make an anonymous complaint to a management company. Number three, if that doesn't work, oftentimes calling the police, especially if it's a noise issue.
Okay.
If it's late at night, noise issues, if it happens to be other activity happening at the property that may not be deemed legal, or code compliance. There's actually code enforcement in various states, including Thousand Oaks. If there's an unpermitted issue that's going on, a deck, something they're doing foundation-wise. I have a case right now where somebody doesn't know where their boundary line is, and they started pouring concrete around what would be a deck over the lawn, and they started cutting trees. That creates that problem. If that doesn't happen, again, yes, you can go the route of hiring the lawyer, but again, the problem being is that as we kind of talk about, that's going to create animosity back and forth. So also make sure you're not doing anything that's a problem. I get so many situations, people don't realize that you're violating something as well. So make sure that you're following the rules and doing what you can. So again, talk to them, report it to an HOA or police, try to contact them, code enforcement, and then come to the attorney, and hopefully we don't have to file a suit, but that ends up being an issue.
This maybe take us back to your last video that you spent time with us on.
That was so long ago.
It was, but maybe also doing some research before you move into the apartment, the condo, the neighborhood, because that's one area that we just don't do. We see this beautiful house, we fall in love with it, or this beautiful apartment or whatever, and we don't take account the stuff that really matters, and that is your neighbors, really. So I guess maybe what part of the thought is to talk to the neighbors before you even move in.
Well, that's another thing, by the way. If there is, when you move into a place, the seller has an obligation to disclose if there is a neighbor problem. So I have a case now where somebody moved into an apartment, actually, and it turns out there was a very, very nasty neighbor that was not, it was a condo, but was not disclosed to them, and that's something that actually has to be disclosed if it's a very volatile neighbor.
Isn't that amazing, huh?
Yes, you want to end up finding out about those issues. And again, check out the area, as I said before. Go on the local newspapers, find out what issues in the area. There's a case years ago where there was a large problem with insects and stuff like that people didn't seek ahead of time, and ultimately resulted in a neighbor dispute problem because both sides were claiming the other had an obligation to fix it. The other big thing I see a lot of people is they do repair issues or they do remodeling or landscaping and don't realize the effect that has on water, on dirt, and other things. Understand gravity. It's going to end up moving things in a certain way. So your little landscaping, you want to have a garden, that's great. But by you doing that, you may have changed the water course now where the 1 or 2 times a year it rains, that water actually can now go into Vin Scully's house and piss him off, and he'll sue. So.
This may be similar advice as to residences, but you do handle, Manfredi Levine handles commercial neighbor disputes also, right?
Correct.
And those can be really big because it's not just getting a good sleep at night. At that point, it's affecting someone's livelihood, their business.
Correct.
Are there any things that you should take into account more in a commercial neighbor dispute than you would for residential?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest problems I see commercial-wise is that people are so excited to get their business into a mall or whatever happens to be, they don't ask not only what businesses are here now, obviously, but what businesses are coming. So for instance, I have a child dentistry business right now that just found out that an adult bookstore is coming in next door. Obviously, that's not necessarily something that might be compatible.
No.
And again, the landlord just wants rent. So you need to ask the questions ahead of time.
Okay.
And again, we always talk lawyer-wise. Assume the worst in some sense. Ask ahead of time to make sure that you're informed about what the landlord's going to be doing. Or for instance, what's happening a lot recently is properties are selling because property values are up, so commercial properties are being sold.
Okay.
And that's creating a lot of tension with regard to tenants all of a sudden having increase in expenses, like I say, CAM charges and stuff like that. But the problem is it's creating animosity between tenants because all of a sudden they're being held responsible for higher expenses. So due diligence is so important. And again, I would say any commercial business, you need to have the exciting person that's the idea person. You also need to have that really down-to-earth dollars and cents numbers person. Maybe both of you are the same person, but you really need to have that due diligence, check out the area, find out crime statistics that are going on, see if there's any problems in the area, see what the Chamber of Commerce is like. Really figure it out, because once you start your business, you're kind of trapped into a 5-year, maybe even a 10-year lease.
Okay.
One other thing real quick, attractive nuisance. I'm out of time.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
attractive nuisance.
Okay,
the biggest issue right now is there are a lot of people are building these fantastic pools and Tropicana and trees. You can get actually sued for attractive nuisance where kids are actually lured to come onto your property. So be careful and make sure you have fences and other things
on pools. Yeah, we're kind of running out of time, but I did want to talk to you a little bit about the psychology, because I think the hardest part of neighbors' disputes is not so much the laws, and we know how to dial 911 or call the police. It really is how to approach your neighbor in a non-confrontational way so that there's a dialogue as opposed to an accusation. I mean, the problem I see is that the minute there's a criticism, especially if there's not a relationship established, which you were talking about, you should probably do. Can you give the viewers any advice on, if you just state, "Excuse me, sir, your music is too loud," that's going to put someone in a defensive position. Is there something we can do to
so
change that?
Oddly enough, and we know this from our networking group, oddly enough, if you come bearing gifts of some kind, that usually is a really good introductory thing. I'm not saying apple pie, but I'm saying, hey, welcome to the neighborhood, even if it's a year or two late. Here's a bottle of wine, or here's a pie, or here's something. Or, hey, I noticed that you actually, you have a pool. I have a pool contractor. I didn't know if you maybe wanted to actually get a second opinion if you wanted. Offer some value to this neighbor, not just, hey, I'm looking for you to sign off on something to say that I'm okay. Give them something of value. Hey, I notice you go on vacation a lot. I'd be glad to look after your trash cans or your dog or something like that. Again, be a neighbor to have them be a good neighbor to you.
Oftentimes we do forget that, we get as much out of personal relationships as we put in. And I think that if there is a way for you to put in to your neighbors, the chances of you having a neighbor dispute are less. It's hard today. We're so busy and we just want to do what we want to do. But actually, when you move into a new neighborhood, you got to put in that time.
Again, it's the value of what you're buying is that entire neighborhood. It's not just your house. So if you create a hostile environment, or at least don't end up getting rid of it, you're all of a sudden, by the way, now you have to disclose. If you have a bad neighbor dispute when you go to sell your house, you have to disclose that. That creates a whole bunch of other issues. So it's one of those things where you have to definitely reach out, get to know your neighbors, and hopefully have a good environment.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for spending time
Thanks for having me.
I really, really appreciate it. We've learned a lot. I know that, especially about neighbor disputes. But
we didn't even talk about dog bites or anything. That was fantastic
we didn't
stuff.
get into it at all. But, anyway, if the viewers, next time you're coming back if you can. If the viewers have questions of you about real estate law, how do they contact you?
We have a great website, manfredilevine.com. I have a Twitter feed. I have other stuff, I think. And then you probably can find me below here, I'm assuming.
Yes, if you have questions, immediate questions, you can put them in the comments below, and both Don and I will respond, because we want to hear about your questions about real estate law, neighbor disputes, and we talked about previously mortgage brokers and real estate agents. We'd love to hear about that. And if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you want to watch more Heart of the Matter videos, I publish one at 1:30 p.m. every Wednesday. So please be sure and subscribe and hit the bell button. That will give you notice when I publish those videos. And we talk about all sorts of legal subjects and try to answer your legal questions.
And we'll tell you where we got our blue shirts at.
That's right. We got the memo. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks, bro.
You got it, man.
All right.
Take it easy. Have a good Friday.
Sorry.